And I think we could jump right in. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Isaac Zavlaki. I am Director of Film Programs at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. I'm really excited about this afternoon's event here at the JCC in Manhattan, evening event at the JCC in Budapest, who are just finishing up their Jewish Film Festival. I have a lot to say about this collaboration in general. I want to give a big shout out to our departing Executive Director, Rabbi Joy Levitt, who made this connection. I have personally visited the Budapest JCC and was very impressed by how connected our communities are. I always had this dream of somehow finding the technology that you could walk into the JCC Manhattan's lobby and have something that would allow us to have a direct portal to another Jewish community across the sea, like the JCC in Budapest. And what do you know? The pandemic brought that to us, and we have Zoom that allows us to really do this so seamlessly. And it's great to be able to connect these communities and to learn from one another. I'll just mention just a couple of advertisements before we get started for the film program. Coming up next week, we have the film Final Decision, which is another Holocaust-themed film that we'll be screening live in person. We're trying to do more of that these days and get us back to seeing films together, though we still will try to make films as much as possible available virtually as well. That film actually has screened with us virtually already. So this is the opportunity to see it in person. The following week we have Searching for Mr. Rogoff, which is about Cinema 5, which is was a distributor on the East Side who really revolutionized the independent film market here in New York. So check those out, much more coming up, and please check out everything we have online at jccfilm.org. Jumping into today's program, we're really excited, as I mentioned, about this collaboration. This whole idea came from Marcell at the JCC in Budapest, and I personally am a huge fan of Hungarian cinema in general. The last few years, it's hard to ignore the fact that some of the most striking Hungarian films have Jewish themes as well, and specifically, of course, their relationship with World War II and the Holocaust are, of course, extremely significant. Those of you who joined us last night in person got to hear Annette Insdorf, I think, talk about the trajectory of these films and how Hungarian cinema in the last few years has really told the stories of the war and the post-war experience in different ways. And we have that conversation available on our JCC Film YouTube page, which we'll share in the chat. I'm going to hand things over in a moment to Marcell from the JCC in Budapest, but I will mention that that we want to make you a part of this conversation. So after our moderator, Michael Paley, who's a good friend of both JCCs, asks his questions, you can put at any point your questions into the chat. And if your question is selected to be asked to the panel, then we will call on you and have you open your mic to ask. If you cannot open your mic, we will read it out for you. But please turn your cameras on, be a part of this conversation, and we look forward to hearing more and seeing you more in person or virtually. Now it gives me great pleasure to hand things over to Marcell, who's the Executive Director of the JCC in Budapest.
Thank you so much, Isaac, and welcome everyone. It is really a great honor and very exciting to be part of this program. The JCC Budapest has a film festival called the JIFI, Zsidó Film Festival, which is the Budapest Jewish and Israeli Film Festival. And today we celebrated, or this year, sorry, we celebrated our 10th anniversary. our film festival, our 10th film festival, just finished this Sunday. So this is the extra program. And when we were thinking about the anniversary, we really wanted to give something special. And we also wanted to bring some films to the US in collaboration with someone, and we couldn't be happier with the JCC Manhattan as our partner, and we hope that those of you who watched the films and enjoyed it. And I also would like to say how grateful I am that our guests accepted our invitation: Zsuzsa Várkonyi, Gábor T Szántó, and Rabbi Michael Paley, who is going to be the MC of this panel discussion. And I really, really am very happy that we could pull this together. And I don't want to take much more of your time. So with this, I will actually give the floor to the wonderful Michael, who is already an honorary Hungarian, leading most of our English language programs already. So we really should give you a medal for doing these programs. So the floor is yours, Michael.
Well, thank you. Köszönöm szépen. Thank you so much, Marcell. I'm really very pleased to be here. I'm a little in awe of coming after my friend Annette Insdorf with her melodic voice and her great knowledge of films. But I think anybody that saw these two films, Those Who Remained and also 1945, would see that the Hungarian film industry is fantastic. It has a tremendous achievement in both screenwriting and adaptation of the books that our two authors have written, a story and a book, and also cinematography, direction, acting, and the whole texture of it has really been wonderful. I think, as maybe Annette said last night, these films are also include many other films, including Son of Saul, which is an absolutely staggering achievement. So that this is a small country and even a smaller Jewish community, not small, maybe more than 100,000, but still it's a tremendous achievement to produce these films. And the films are extremely important in the cultural expression of Jewish life. Hungarian Jews have always been a secular community. They've always been more committed to the culture of Jewish life than the religion of Jewish life. In a survey of Hungarian Jewry, 54%, the highest in the world, said we are cultural Jews. So literature and art and film are certainly part of this. Hungary also boasts everyone from Michael Curtis, Kertész, the director of Casablanca. So if you think about Hungarian films all the way back, you would say that the Hungarian filmmakers and directors and cinematographers have always been among the best. And these two films are no exception. But these two films are both fraught with tension. There's tension almost everywhere in the film. The 1945 film, from the very first kind of sounds of the train, even to the kind of Kol Nidre gypsy music on the way to the final denouement, in almost every slow step in the film has tension in it. And Those Remain, you know, the threat and also the eros hangs over the film at almost any moment, and the sense that in that moment of Hungarian Jewish history, they could be discovered and betrayed, discovered, and also taken away, also hangs at least over the second half of the film. So these two films come at just the very end of the war, and really before the Hungarian Jewish history, or Hungary in general, knows exactly what's going to happen. The Germans are gone, the Russians are here, and no one quite knows, I think, in the films for sure it's true, exactly how threatening the Russians will be, exactly how difficult. Will they leave? Will they not leave? So you picked, the two authors, the liminal space, the space in between the war and the longer settled period. And I'm just interested, as you began to think about writing about the Holocaust, why you did that. Why was this period of time attractive to you? Maybe we'll ask Zsuzsa first.
Actually, what I wrote in my novel was in its atmosphere very much what I experienced as a child who was born in 48, so just the post-war generation. And in my novel, I wrote this constant fear, what was typical not only for my parents, but also for the whole neighborhood and for friends, and also the overcompensation of this fearful state of mind by using a lot of humor. And the main thing was this clinging together in the time of unknown enemies. And today's virus reminds me very much to the atmosphere of the late 40s and 50s, when we didn't know where the shoots will come from. So we were just a kind of paralyzed, or we tried to make only very little movement. So move very little. And everybody in my generation had the instruction from home that you shouldn't talk about it in the school. You shouldn't talk about it with the neighbors, although there were no state secrets. Just we don't know what is dangerous and what will not be dangerous for us. And this atmosphere is what I tried to put into my book also. And the characters which were around, they were very much like my characters in the book. Fearful, they tried to keep their original culture, but they did it in a very silent manner somehow. And this is what I think about the most important point in the history for me, for a generation which wasn't attacked directly, but in Hungarian we say that the fearfulness, what we got through the mother milk, we all, nobody in my generation had to be taught extra, or didn't need an explanation why. It was so natural that we have to be cautious. We have to take care of every word what we would say to others. And also, maybe Gábor can also talk about this. Many Jewish families made a taboo of the fact and of the word Jew or Jewish. Many people thought that this is the way to survive. Just silent.
Although your character, Sunny, is not silent. She's much more dangerous. Her behavior is somewhat out there. So you have a character that's not that way. And before I think maybe I will let Gábor to try and or answer that question. Why did you pick this time?
Good afternoon for everyone. I picked up this topic because I always focused on the after effect of the Holocaust, and I was always interested what happened after the Holocaust in Hungary, because nobody or almost nobody had written about the Jewish existence, about the problems of the Jews in a post-Holocaust context. It was a sensitive issue because a part of the survivors became communist, and the other part of the survivors were in silence. They were afraid. They didn't want to tell their stories to the descendants. So the silence was a typical phenomenon in the survivor families. And I wanted to break this taboo. And I almost in all of my books, I write about the experiences of the Jews survivors who are not necessarily defined themselves as Jewish, but they have this kind of 20th century Jewish experience within their bones. So I wrote about this coming back from the camps and try to bury remnants of the killed people, like I did it in my short story Homecoming 1945. The film is based on, and the short story itself appeared in English in the Moment magazine in New York. This is the book we are talking about in Hungarian. And this book will have now an Italian, Chinese, and the Slovak translation in 2022, next year. And the story itself was translated into several languages. So I felt it is a very important topic to talk about the Jewish experience after the Shoah. And I felt for almost 2 decades thick walls around this topic. And I still feel these walls around this topic because the language itself is very difficult for the Hungarian literature or for the Hungarian open-minded audience to talk about Jews. The word itself, Jew, it is a very heavy burdened word. It's very difficult to talk about Jewish problems, Jewish dilemmas for the greater audience, not just Jewish authors. So I felt it is a taboo, and as a writer who wanted to talk about sensitive questions, wanted to put it into literary context, I choose these topics, or I choose this topic, the survivors, the coming back of the survivors, or the Jews who became members of the communist movement. I wrote another novel on this phenomenon, and I still feel it is very important topic within Central European context and in contemporary context too.
Marcell?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Did you want to think about this as well?
Yeah, I think this period.
Even though you didn't write the book or direct a movie.
Yes, I feel like I'm sitting among giants. But I think what both Gábor and Zsuzsa have pointed to is that a very strong and important part of the identity journey and experience is not only what happened during the Second World War, but actually what happened after. So my personal story with the aunt who I had who survived Auschwitz, and we didn't know, like I didn't know until the age of 13 that we were Jewish, and the whole thing started after that. And this whole exploration of these stories could really happen only after the fall of the Iron Curtain. And my very first shocking experience was not so much of course, the stories of the Second World War and my aunt telling about the camps, but what was even more shocking is when she told me when she came back and how she was received. And I think both of these books and both of these films are very important pieces to put that piece together, because it's also about how people were received, how we are reflecting on that part of history. Some of us had this naive idea that when it was all over, then all of a sudden all the burdens came off, and then there was a point in history of great relief. And that great relief never really came in that sense, not after the war. And it's like this tension that starts in this period. I think it's beautifully pictured in these two films. And also it makes people it makes people face our own history in that sense. And there is so many complexities, and so Hungary has a lot of issues with its own past, I guess all countries. But we have a particularly difficult one when it comes to Jewish communities, Judaism, and especially when we, in a period of history when a lot of us, especially the younger generation, want to get rid of the Holocaust identity, that it's not the only thing that defines us, but it still comes back because it's not only about that, it's about how we blend into society and how we live together. And for that, we need to face those atmospheres and those stories. So I think it's a very important piece in putting the puzzle pieces together when we look back at a very troubled and very challenging 20th century.
But to take that image, ask maybe first Zsuzsa and then Gábor, again, this blending in, nothing could be further from your films than blending in. The Arlo figure has a number. We only get one glimpse of it, I think, in the film, but he set apart that he didn't lose his family in a bombing or anything else. It was Auschwitz. That Sunny can't protect her sister. The experience of your characters doesn't blend in at all. In fact, it clashes with the general Hungarian society. They're quite distinctive in that a non-Jew couldn't actually have the stories that they have. And maybe I'll just say about Gábor, of course, the two Jews that you have, the two visible Jews in 1945, just their very silent presence is an indictment of everybody else. No one in that film can for a second think that the Jews have the same memory and the same interpretation of the recent history of the villagers that are responding to them. It's almost an accusation. It's an accusation of the villagers. It's an accusation of the Jews. Here are the Jews bringing problems again, destroying, property, ruining relationships, calling our bluffs. It's a very strong identity clash. I'm just wondering if you felt that growing up, and did you intend that in your film? How do you deal with it in your life? Zsuzsa, I think I'm asking first.
In my environment, which was a district where many Jews lived and are still living, in Lipótváros, which is Leopold town.
New Leopoldville. I live there.
Okay. I like the area. There were no open clashes. No, I never heard about them. I never witnessed them. So it was relatively peaceful. But I know when I talked later in my university student years with a friend's friend, he said something about the Jews, how they are. I can't remember. It wasn't terrible, but it was so hostile. And I asked him, how many Jews you know? And it turned out that he doesn't know any Jews. He just had at one time a classmate, a girl who had some jewelry on. And that's why he thought that they are very rich. But he didn't know for sure. He just thought so. And that's what made him entitled to say that Jews are these or that. And I think that the people who are socially uneducated, I don't mean it's university, but emotionally, they don't have the experience how other type of people, whether Jewish or Gypsy or Germans or whatsoever, they don't have any experience. They just want to close their opinion and defend it from any new information. and this is the psychological background of any prejudice, that I want to be sure that I know already what I don't know. But I want to feel that I know already. You are a type like that, and you are that type. I'm sure, because I see on your glasses, on your mouth, on your shirt, whatsoever. But people have the illusion that they know things which they have no experience with.
Gábor?
I experienced in the school some anti-Semitism, and later in my life, I always felt that part of the society have anti-Semitic prejudices, and occasionally I felt this. And sometimes I felt safe among non-Jews when I shared with them, for example, in my secondary school, at a literary reading, when I read a poem in 1984 on my very early Jewish experiences. I was afraid to read this poem, but my literary teacher, a religious Catholic lady who sympathized with the democratic opposition in the time of communism, he pushed me or opened my mind and gave me strength to share these thoughts with my classmates, and I did it. And the bigger part of the class was very interested in my feelings in that poem, because it was some unique thing at that time. And later I also felt that some of the readers, some of the audience, some of the population have positive feeling, or at least openness toward the Jews, and part of the society have negative feelings, prejudice, different kinds of anti-Jewish sentiments. So it is our reality in Central Europe, and I think it is also a reality in everywhere in the world. The question is whether the political context, the cultural context, allow them to share in the public life their anti-Semitic prejudices, anti-Semitic statements, or the culture itself is with the Jews or with the minorities, help them, protect them, and try to create a culture in which the minorities can feel safe. It is a very important question. And we felt in the last couple of years some, I don't say danger, but I say uncomfortable situations in Central East Europe, started with right after the political changing after 1990, when the radical right got a political party and the anti-Semitism started to appear on the public scene. And we have seen it in the next generation, in another far-right party. And we have seen in the last couple of years that this kind of radical anti-Jewish political propaganda lessen and lessen, but the different kind, more sophisticated anti-Semitism, anti-liberal type of anti-Semitism is in the Hungarian politics. So we feel this, and we, of course, we in a broader context, we see the world, we see the different kind of anti-Semitism and anti-Israel type of anti-Semitism. So the anti-Semitism itself modernized, and we see as a multifaceted phenomenon. So, you know, a diaspora Jew always have to be careful, always have to be informed, always have to look at the world, what happened, and this kind of sensibility we live with. This is really in our genes. So nothing new under the sun.
Zsuzsa, I'd like to, yeah, please.
Yes, I would like to add a positive example. I don't know the figures, how many people are anti-Semitic and how many are not, but the manager of the house where I was brought up, and I lived there for 25 years, she had a peasant background, maybe Catholic, and the house manager had the task to talk with the secret police guy who came from time to time and ask the managers to report on the tenants of the house. And this lady, my mother rang the bell at her and wanted to ask something or talk about something. And this lady pushed her out and said, okay, tomorrow we will do it. And she pushed her out of the apartment. And my mother, who lived in this era, knew that there was something important going on in the room inside. It was the hall, but the entrance. And the next day, the lady said, you know, just the secret police guy was here and was asking about you. Because my father was at that time already carried off into an internment.
A prison, yeah.
Not internment. And he was already not present in our life, and many families where the man was taken away, the families were displaced or pushed into a village, and the apartment was used for their people, for the people of the government. And our house master didn't want the guy to see my mother, just to make it simpler, that she would say just innocent, stupid little things, and she didn't want to see. And she was great, and I made out of her figure, or out of her character, a whole couple into my novel. The couple who takes in the main male hero of the book after he returns from Auschwitz or one camp, and was looking for his family, couldn't find neither the wife nor the sons, and the last chance is to see where this couple lived nearby, because his wife's family had a cottage in this village, and he enters this house where this very simple, very decent, uneducated couple lives. And when he realizes that nobody came back, of course, there was no by chance that he couldn't find anybody from the family, he collapses, and this couple takes care of him for 2 months in the summer of 45. And the character came from our own house manager, this very nice lady who was taking care of the people that the least harm would be done against them.
And so we see that in the film, but Marcell, and then I have a follow-up for Gábor.
No.
Yes, I think it's very...
In those who remain, these characters are not available.
But somebody's taken.
Yeah.
Somebody's taken, right? So.
As both of you were speaking, it's important to note that there are different layers, I think, of anti-Semitism. So I used to be a volunteer educator, and I used to be involved in education. So I went to see a lot of non-Jewish Hungarian kids in the Hungarian school system that had to learn about the Holocaust. And when I asked the question, so do you think there is too much talk about the Holocaust? 90% said, oh yes, too much. And then I started to ask questions. Okay, so what do you know? How many, when did it happen exactly in Hungary? Well, I'm not so sure about it. Okay, so how many victims do we talk about? Not so sure about it either. And when we started to ask questions and details, there were no answers. So I was like, how is that possible? That on the one hand, there is so much talk about the Holocaust. On the other hand, you don't know nothing about it. So how is that even possible? And, you know, when I first experienced this, I thought that saying something like this, there is too much. It's insensitive. It's they lack empathy, and you know, it's a borderline of anti-Semitism. But as I was spending more and more time, it's not that. It's just if it's not part of the family story, if it's not part of their personal interest or attachment, they just automatically push it away. And when I'm saying there are different layers of anti-Semitism, even if somebody says something anti-Semitic, it doesn't necessarily means that they are the convinced types of far-right members of the political party that Gábor was turned off, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't counter it or we shouldn't reflect to it, but it's very important how we reflect to it. Because if there is a too aggressive approach to this, then they go all on the defensive. And it's very important to say that in society, there are different layers of this. And there are some people who say, most of the people will have this soft kind of anti-Semitism, or I don't know how to call it, when it's coming from something they heard, or it's like in the air, or like it's from a reaction. They don't know the real root of it, but they can say something very offensive without the basic knowledge. It's very important to divide that from somebody who is a convinced anti-Semite. And I think that's a very, very small minority who are convinced and following ideas. It's always like the fire is smaller than the dust and the smoke. Sorry, but it's dangerous. The fire can grow, but it's important to put things or try to put things in place, because as much as it's not okay to generalize on other things and to use stereotypes, it's also not useful to put generalizations or anti-Semitism. And then if it's a little bit anti-Semitic, then we put the label to it and then it's all the same, because it's not all the same. And that's how society is so complex in this. And when we talk about the modernization of anti-Semitism that Gábor mentioned, it's also important to put that into perspective and to reflect to this in a more comprehensive and complex way.
I appreciate the comment. You know, of course, the Holocaust is a very difficult thing to talk about. It's difficult in Hungary. Who did it? Was it our fault? Was it their fault? Who were the victims? Why did it happen very late in Hungary? It wasn't like Poland and other places. So it has a tremendous presence, and there are monuments. There are monuments to the Holocaust. If you live in Oily Podvaros, you see them on the streets, you see them around, and they're conflictual. Also, there's no easy monument to the Holocaust without both embracing of the victim and an accusation of the perpetrator. There's a famous memorial in Budapest since 2005, the shoes on the Danube. The shoes on the Danube remember the people shot into the Danube, Jews, but it also points a finger at the locals that shot the people into the Danube. That wasn't the Germans, that was the Hungarians. So it kind of comes back to 1945 again and again. I think, you know, you said you had to be careful about it, but I can't think of any less careful a movie than 1945. You know, you have two silent Jews turning in a village, you know, on its head, exposing every drug dependency and miscue and everything, just in their very presence, just walking to the cemetery. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, it wasn't, if for a person who was about careful, it was a very risky thing to do. Did you think it was risky when you made the film?
Well, I didn't think very much on the risk, because I have written this story in 2003, and I've written several stories among these topics. So I knew always that I touched something very sensitive. but I believe strongly in justice. I mean, like in the Torah says, justice, pursue, tzedek, tirdof, which means you need to find your justice, and you need to find the justice of others, which means you have to be correct, you have to be precise. If you talk about the responsibility, you don't need and it's forbid to exaggerate. If you talk criticism, you have to be precise whom you criticize. And if you try to talk about the whole society, you have to talk about the layers of the society, like we did it, like I did it in my story, and like we did it in the film. There are people, there are no black and white. The film is black and white, but the people are colorful. The society is colorful. The people are different. So I sometimes I feel as there is a phenomenon like anti-Semitism, there is another kind of problem when people, politicians use the Holocaust as a stick to beat the head of others without context, without real feeling, knowledge, and responsibility. So the Holocaust is not a political tool. It's not something that the politicians can use freely. It's very, very sensitive issue. We have to be precise. We have to be realistic. We have to be precise when we talk about the museum, when somebody wants to elect a museum, but we don't, it's not a good thing to use the Holocaust as a political tool for some purpose that is outside the memory, outside the culture of memory.
I just have a short question, then we'll go to the people out there. Zsuzsa, your film has in some ways a happy ending. Everybody finds a partner, and and Stalin dies. I'm just interested by that.
It's not. This part of the film has nothing to do with
the book.
With my book, Stalin's death, but. The scriptwriter had to finish the story earlier than my book does. Actually, even in my book, both partners, both people who find a new partner, and it's psychologically very well explained or visible how it happens. So I like the film a lot. Still, I think that I am responsible only for the book, and I'm happy if people read it, because it's a much bigger material than the film. And this part of finding a strong end to the story after 84 minutes or after 80 minutes. They had to do something. We had a lot of discussions and also fights with Barnabas, the director, whom I like a lot, and we like each other. And thank God, he did understand at the end what are my crucial points, what is absurd to put into the film and what is absurd to leave out of the film. There was one phase of the script writing when I sent him 2 pages of points which were nonsense for the age, for these people, and so on. And in this longish 2-side long letter, I wrote that in my book there are 5 dramatic points, 5 climaxes in the story, and in this script there is none of them available. We don't even know why this guy is living alone. We don't know that he is Jewish. We don't know that we are after the war. We don't know nothing. And he found a very good solution for every criticism I made. I'm very grateful for him being such a good listener, because I think he's very young. Right now he's 44, but at that time when he found out that he wants to make a film out of it, then he wasn't even 40. He's not Jewish. So it's great what he did.
He did a great job. He did a wonderful film.
I would like to add a short remark to what Marcell said, and Gábor also partly. We should be aware of the fact that in Hungary there was no mental re-education after the war. There was no discussion about what happened in the Holocaust. In Germany, the American program of let's people talk about it, what they did, what their father or the mother did, they reached an elaborated level of their conscience, of their mind, of their memory, and so on. And nothing happened in Hungary in this respect, while we know that by statistics that there was no other country in Europe where the public would have participated in the killing and robbing of the Jews than in Hungary. We know that for sure. But nobody's responsible for grandpa's sins. So yes, they should know about it. They should know facts. They should know that it's a very heavy topic. Everybody knows that.
Yes, we all know. We should also note that there's hardly any country in Europe in which so many people also save Jews. In Budapest, we have them, and their names are on the highways. Not just Wallenberg and Karl Lutz and Angela Roti and people like that, but people.
None of them were Hungarians. These people are not Hungarians.
Yeah, these people are not Hungarians, but people save Jews. People save Jews in Budapest. People in the streets. They hid them. And of course, it wasn't such a long time. It was only months. It was different.
Yes, but the silent or half-silent anti-Semitism of the average school kids has nothing. It's true, and I am very much for being grateful for the people who did the courage. But the average school kid should know about facts so that he or she will know what he is talking about if he starts to talk about Jewish stories.
Was that one of the purposes of your film, Gábor?
Sorry, what was your question?
Was it one of the purposes of your film to say to the Hungarian school children, you were complicit, you took people's property,
Yes, it was an important part of the story, and more important part of the film, that process, that discounted auction, when the people got the Jewish property in 1944. So the state made people collaborators in the sins, and the people, some part of the people felt a responsibility when the Jews came back, because they had to watch in their eyes, and they watched them as looking at a mirror, and some people have seen their very own sins because they felt the responsibility, and this caused the secondary wave of anti-Semitism right after the war, right after the Holocaust. But we shouldn't forget that Central Europe and East Europe was a relatively poor part of the world, outside the great cities of Central Europe. There was a great peasant society. There was real poverty, and there were other traumas in Central Europe, like the Trianon Peace Treaty, when Hungary lost 2/3 of its territories and half of the population. And there were different kinds of traumas in this region of the world that made the people sometimes insensitive, sometimes fragile, or they have their other kinds of traumas too. I tried to reflect in my short story book, 1945 and Other Stories, different kind of traumas of this society and Jewish traumas after the war, after the Holocaust, because not just that was the only one trauma coming back to the birthplace and see that others live in their houses, but there were different kinds of traumas. So this kind of minority perspective is in the book. And in my other novels, in my novel Europa Symphony, which focuses a Transylvanian family story and the West Berlin family story in the Cold War, because Europe is a traumatized place. We shouldn't forget that different kinds of traumas live near each other, and we also have to be conscious on other kinds of traumas, because these competitive traumas are with us in their very present political conflict. My Europa Symphony, we try to make also a film from this novel. We are in the process now. So these problems, these historical problems, traumas are living with us. We see it in the present day context, in the present political context.
How Jewish it is to live with traumas.
I appreciate in Zsuzsa's film that one of the teachers, when he's asked how she's doing, he says, the trauma, which is really right out there. And in your film, the broken glass and even broken mirrors are very stark, even walking on the broken glass at a certain moment. There's a question out there. I want to ask the question from the viewers. It goes, the question is like this.
We'll bring her on, Michael. Ronnie, you want to ask your question?
Yes, please. Sorry.
Given the pain, this is for Zsuzsa, given the pain you clearly felt as a young Jew in Hungary, did you personally consider immigrating to Israel or to the US? Why or why not? Similarly, have the others considered immigrating? Thank you.
Many people did emigrate, many Jewish people and non-Jewish people. That's a historical process which started more than 100 years ago. Actually, I lived in the US more than for 3 years. And there was one point when a very benevolent Jewish person, by the way, asked if the politics goes very much to the right side and anti-Semitic, which was the case at the moment, and if he wanted to stay in the US, then she could help. And I was absolutely aware that she is very benevolent. She wants the best for us and whatever we want. And I can remember the feeling in my stomach that this is the end of my being myself. In the US, we had very peaceful years, and it was like a long holiday, but I couldn't imagine to have an identity as an American psychologist. I'm a psychologist by profession, and I published 8 psychological books in Hungary, and most people who are interested in psychology know my name. And I knew that it's nonsense in America. In America, I am a person who is buying bread and washing in the laundry. I'm nobody there. And my husband felt the same way. And so it was for us very clear that we will return home, because culturally and also our memories and reminiscences are connected to Hungary only. even if both of us spent a lot of time outside, not only in America. I lived in Austria for 3 years as a younger person, and my husband traveled a lot and spent several semesters outside Hungary. But this is the place where we return. Is it a response which is okay with you?
My friend Tommy once said, after being asked why he hasn't left Hungary on almost every panel, he said, you know, we didn't leave in the 19th century. We didn't leave in 1917. We didn't leave in 1940. We didn't leave in 1948. We're not leaving. And it is true that the population of Jews that emigrated to Israel has the highest return rate of any state. Hungarians like to live in Hungary. I even like to live in Hungary. Marcell, I did want to let you respond to some of these comments.
Yeah, it's funny because many times we are actually asked the question, why don't we just leave the country? So if there is anti-Semitism here, why don't we just buy plane tickets and move to Israel or the US? And I'm always asking back, okay, but whom will you pick? Whom will you choose? Who will be the ones you decide that you should leave? That's not such a simple thing to do on the one hand. And second, I think there is some special thing to it that from all the countries that were affected by the Holocaust, Hungary is one of the few countries that have still an authentic, big community that is still Hungarian. And I think there is a huge value to it, that if you go to Germany, you see some Jewish communities, of course, you see Israelis, you see Russian immigrants, and it's a whole mix. If you go to other places in Europe which were affected by the Holocaust, you have either no Jewish communities or people from other countries come. And Hungary is among the few countries where you have this strong Hungarian Jewish presence. And if I go to the Tokaj region, I have my great-great-great-grandparents buried there. And that's something that means something, I think. So in my family, we've also had stories of wanting to move to other countries. And my sister and my brother, they live in Berlin now, and my mom. I would like to stay.
You're Hungarian.
Yes.
Before I turn it back to Isaac, who I just want to thank the panel. It was a wonderful discussion and really inspiring. And I want to tell my compatriots from the Upper West Side of New York that this is a wonderful Jewish community. It's a Jewish community that's awakening. It's a Jewish community that is exploring things. It's not a repeat of either America or of Israel. It's its own unique self, which is extremely warming and powerful and very good to visit. So I want everybody to come and visit. And when you do come and visit, make sure you go to the Balinthouse JCC of Budapest, because it's a great place to go, and you'll be inspired by it. And after the pandemic is over, please, everyone should come visit here first. I turn it back to you, Isaac, and thank you for asking me to do this moderating.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Rabbi Michael Paley for being the perfect person to moderate this conversation. I want to thank all of our guests. It was really enlightening and a fantastic way to bring these films together. And of course, a huge thank you to our friends at the JCC in Budapest. Folks, please join us for more conversations. Please stay safe. We want to see you in person as much as possible, as soon as possible. Till then, we'll also try to give you as much virtually as possible. Mark your calendars. Our next big festival is January 13th till the 17th, our Cinematters New York Social Justice Film Festival, MLK weekend with fabulous new films. Till then, we'll be bringing you more weekly programs. Thank you so much, and have a good day and night.